Welcome to Daring To, a podcast that finds out how CEOs and entrepreneurs navigate today's business world, the conventions they're breaking, the challenges they've faced, and the decisions that they've made. And lastly, just what makes them different. Well, welcome to Daring To. I'm absolutely thrilled today to have Lynne Franks OBE on our podcast. It's a unique honour. Having read about your background, Lynne, I am humbled to be having the opportunity to talk to you. But more importantly, I think just the opportunity for people around the world just to hear about your life, what you've done. And I think like the inspiration and aspirations that you can help other, particularly women, but not just women around the world, to understand just what is possible. So thank you so much for joining us today. Not only are you an OBE winner, you are an acclaimed author. We'll talk about some of the books that you've written, and some of the titles I think sum it up as we go through this podcast. But I want to start with a quote that struck me, that when reading about you, it kind of hit the heart, I think, of what you are about and about the belief and passion about just what's possible. So you quoted, "You don't have to be a business to be an entrepreneur. It's part of your spirit, your passion to fulfill your life's purpose and manifest your dreams." I don't know, but it seems like that's the core of what you've done over time. Would you say that, that quote that you have quoted about that it's part of your spirit, I guess at a very early age, did you know that this was going to be your role in society, to be this massive influencer, change maker around gender equality, around the role that women have, and just like the massive impact that society and communities can play in creating a fairer societal base across the world? I mean, at 16, when you left school, did you go like, I just know what my life ambition is. I just know where it's going to take me. Tell me.
Well, at this point in my life, when I'm in my early 70s, I still have no idea what my life ambition is. So I certainly didn't at 16. But like you, Rita, I'm from a family of immigrants, and my grandparents were immigrants. And I always had this enthusiasm and passion for new ideas. I also kind of always knew what was going to happen next. I still do, although I have to say COVID got me a bit by surprise. But generally, I'm very intuitive about trends and how people, particularly women, want to live their lives, how they want to work. So when I first started working with women entrepreneurs, when I wrote the Seed Handbook in 2000, I knew that more and more women would want to leave their corporate jobs and really start their own sustainable businesses. SEED is an acronym for Sustainable Enterprise and Empowerment Dynamics. And that's then become a program which I've delivered all over the world, really, teaching how to start small sustainable businesses. So, no, I didn't know what I was going to do then, but I always knew that I was going to be enthusiastic about whatever it was.
So, I think there are lots of young women today, older women today, women of every generation who, if they were looking back and saying, there you were at 16, you left school, like, you studied to be a typist, a shorthand typist. For those of you that are listening that don't even know what that is, trust me, it's like it was before you could text and all the rest of it, and it required actually the ability to really know how to like think about letters and numbers. So I remember it. You may not, but if you don't, go back and look at it, because it's actually, it's the start of communication. But you did that. But then at 21, you did something I would say at that time must have been seen as trailblazing. Did you know at 21, there you are, you get encouraged by somebody to start a public relations company, and you do it at 21, you start your own company.
Well,
I don't know.
I'll tell you
in your 20s, right?
Yeah.
How does that happen? I mean, at that time, women were like, I can remember some of like myself growing up going like, women, like my parents told me like, hey, you got to get a good education, get a good job. They'll find you a nice man, Indian man. You'll get married. You'll have babies. That'll be your life. I remember that. Right, really? That's my life.
Why should I tell you?
21. Tell me about it.
Okay. Yes, I was actually studying to be a journalist, which is why I did shorthand typing. At that time, we didn't have computers, we had typewriters, and shorthand was essential to make notes. And so I got a job as a young journalist working for a big mail order company, actually. And I did a lot of training through that, of knowing how to write an article, how to interview people, how to write. From there, I went to work. Actually, I can never remember which way around it was. I worked on Petticoat magazine, which was the first teenage girls magazine in the country. And I went in as a secretary, and I worked with people like Janet Street Porter and Eve Pollard and others. And I would write.
By the way, are icons too, right? So just to show, just that I just want to pause you there, because people need to understand, like, that impact that you had at 21 to be working with people that were icons in that time. That's pretty special of what you brought to the table.
Well, actually, I was younger than 21 when I worked for them, or with them, rather. I was actually about 19. In those days, which was the late 60s, age wasn't really so much of an issue. I didn't go to university. I didn't even stay and do A-levels, and neither did a lot of people. And if you look at people like Richard Branson and quite a few other successful entrepreneurs, a lot of them, like me, left school at 16 in those days, which is just the way it was, because it was like we couldn't wait to get on with things. So I worked as a young journalist. I worked with these women who are great friends of mine still. And I got a job in PR by default. I wasn't interested in being in PR. I couldn't get the right journalist job I wanted. Got a freelance PR job, found out what it was, and thought I can do this really easily, because it's about people, it's about connecting, communicating, writing, all the things that I love doing. So I met Catherine Hamnett, of course, who's a wonderful fashion designer, at a trade show, and she suggested that I become her PR agent. And we were both 21, and she was going to pay me £20 a week, which she didn't even have. And off I went. So very rapidly, I got 4 young fashion clients and built the business up, working from my kitchen table, which is how a lot of women start. So I knew when I started talking about seed and talking to other women about starting up from the kitchen table, exactly what that meant. I mean, I'm sitting at my kitchen table talking to you now, and I've continually started new businesses from my kitchen table, wherever I've lived, whether it's been LA or London or Spain, all the places I've traveled around in and had bases in. So anyway, so I started the PR business, and because I did things differently, and because I was so enthusiastic and passionate about what I did, it built up very rapidly. It seemed at the time it was rapid. And over 20 years, we became the leading fashion PR agency, well, in the world, really. And in that time, I created London Fashion Week, the British Fashion Awards. I was also very involved in causes. I started what became the biggest AIDS awareness campaign, Fashion Cares, which MAC Cosmetics took over and still runs. And I worked for Human Rights Watch, doing a huge music campaign with artists like Bruce Springsteen and Peter Gabriel traveling the world. That was in the early 70s. I launched Green Consumer Week, and was involved in all sorts of really interesting causes and NGOs and things on environment, things on human rights, right back then in the early 70s. And I always said to my team, which grew quite rapidly to about 50 young people, that as much as we worked for commercial companies, we were always going to be in that give back frame where we could work for causes that we really believed in for free. And so that's what we did. It was always a balance. And I had a fantastic team of what appeared then to me to be very young. They were very young. They were from working class backgrounds, many of them. They were mixed race, all races, all genders. And they were 17, 18, 19 kids that I met that I just felt had a real spark. And we're all in touch now. And the majority of them have gone on to huge successes. And of course, now are in their 50s and early 60s. And we're all still great friends. And they all tell me that it was because I showed them they could do anything they wanted. And we had young single mums, all sorts of people that really didn't have a lot of opportunity in those days. And I gave them that opportunity. So now they say it was my belief in them being able to do anything that then gave them their belief in themselves, boys and girls, actually, men and women. And so I suppose that's what I still do. I suppose that's one of my gifts, is not only knowing what's going to happen next, but actually giving individuals that confidence and belief in themselves. I still am doing it. I'm still coaching one-to-one top business women. I coach entrepreneurs, startups, community leaders, all women at this point. And I'm still doing the same thing. That it's very easy for women particularly to lose their confidence and their sense of self, however they may look successful on the outside. So that's what I do. That's what I still do.
Anyway, where do you think that's come from? No. There are so many women and men, right? That, your achievements, forget gender, forget the rest of it. Your achievements have come from something inside of you that has said, I assume, I don't know, where did it come from? And this ability to convince people and help them to see just what is possible. Where do you think that came from? What was driving that for you, do you think?
I don't know. I really don't know. In fact, we've been having a lot of Zooms lately, myself and the various people that work for me over that 20 years of the PR company. And when they tell me how I changed their life, I really very moved. I am very moved because I wasn't aware. I just saw this potential in them and I'd say, come on, let's do it. I still do it. I still have a young team here today in Somerset where I run this hub of a cafe and a store. All my seed work that I've done for years has come together in two buildings, 500-year-old buildings in a little town here. And now I'm online, of course, as everybody is. And I still see the potential in people. And because I push myself and I just think that everybody can do anything if we allow ourselves and give ourselves permission. So, if I can do it, and I left school at 16 and I've written books and I do write them myself and I am a writer, I write all the time, then why can't anybody do it? That's how I look at it.
So let's talk a little bit about it's a bit of a bandwagon thing, right? I would say at the moment, right? A lot of companies say 10 years ago on, and particularly in a few recent years have kind of jumped on the bandwagon of we're diverse, and not just companies, societies, communities, governments, societal institutions of two things I think. One, the heightened awareness of actual issues that are really important. Gender issues, equality issues, societal's role, if you like, in building these communities and giving people that opportunity. You seem to have been able to sort of weave that through the organizations that you've developed, the work that you do, whether that's with individuals or with communities or through the books and publications, right? You were doing that because it, with real results, I would say, versus it being a lip service, shall we say, that you often see being played to issues of importance. So as you look back now at what you've done, where do you think we stand today on this stuff? Do you think that there's been a significant shift? We're right in the middle of these discussions that are happening right now, which are happening right now in COP26. What do you think? Are we really making progress? Have we made enough progress?
I don't think we're making anything like the progress we should be. If you look at most corporations, banks, etc., it's still a majority of white middle-class men on the boards. If you look at governments, it's still the same. If you look at the people that have been speaking at COP on the official UN boards, whether it's our the UK Prime Minister, the American President, whatever, it's still white middle-class men. The most interesting speakers that I've seen on the news, because I'm not in Glasgow, because I knew it was going to be a bit of a nightmare, are the Indigenous young women that have come over, particularly from the Amazon, who are very articulate and are telling their truth of what's going on over there. I think generally what I've seen of COP26, which as Greta Thunberg says, and how can't believe people like Boris Johnson try and take it over, the blah, blah, blah. It's just a talk fest of people with personal interest, financial interest in wanting it to be a certain way. If you look at the private planes that have come in to Glasgow, that I think it was 47 limos that were following.
But we're all interested in the economy, right? We're all interested in, the environment. The environment. Yeah. They forgot that bit.
And it's been quite shameful, really. Biden had 47 cars in his cavalcade. It's just unbelievable. And then you see these beautiful young women who have somehow managed to get the budget together to come over from the Amazon, Brazil, Ecuador, Peru, and so on, who then say beautifully and eloquently what's really going on in their countries, and how their president, the president of Ecuador, may stand on the platform saying how he's doing so much for the environment. But the reality is, at the same time, he's selling off to the oil companies all the time. I've been out to Ecuador. I've seen it for myself. I've been with this particular young woman's people out there, the Achua people, right in the middle of the jungle. I saw what was going on. That was 12, 15 years ago. I mean, I think it's, so at grassroots, whether it's Indigenous women of all ages, or whether it's women from all over the world of all ages. I mean, Greta Thunberg, let's look at her, 17 years old. What an extraordinary young woman. Mm-hmm. At the same time, we're on the outside of the main hall, yelling and trying to get in, I guess, and banging away. That's what I've heard from my friends who are there. And the so-called power of the patriarchal age of the corporations, of the governments, are all inside that hall. And it's lovely having Prince Charles feeling... which is to an extent, I suppose, from his perspective, fair enough, that he's been talking about this for 40 years and suddenly everybody else is talking about the same thing. You've got David Attenborough inside. I saw a picture of Charles this morning with Stella McCartney, who as a fashion designer has been very anti-leather and making ecological clothes and accessories for a long time, so good for her. But there's still so inside the hall, on the whole, though, it's still men and women that are there inside, on the whole, are also playing the corporate game. So they are trying to get the banks to stop financing fossil fuel. That's a big move in the last 2 days. That's great, but it is still men. So where are the women? They are at grassroots. They're in communities. They're protesting. They're activists. They are coming together in collaborative ways all across the planet, whether it's Africa, South America, the UK, wherever it is, saying, what can we do in our community? And we have to do that. As far as I'm concerned, it will be women in leadership roles who will create the new future, a new future with a different kind of economy, a different kind of agriculture, a different kind of education. It will be from the women, supported by beautiful men who understand it is time. The Dalai Lama is quoted as saying that the future of the world is in the hands of the women from the West. So we have to really come together in collaboration and do whatever we can, whether it's in our own street, our own town, our own village, our own country, and indeed the world. That's the way we're going to make the change. So there's some wonderful women constantly talking. Vandana Shiva, for example, she's an Indian woman. I'm sure you know of her. She's a professor. She's a scientist, and she is so passionate, and she doesn't take any rubbish from anybody. And she is doing seminars like every day. I see her on something or other, saying it how it is, how agriculture has to change, how the seeds for the very food that is being grown to put in children's mouths has to be done in a different way than being chemicalized by Monsanto and other companies. I mean, she is a powerhouse, of incredible powerhouse. Still, I don't know how old Bandana is, probably early 70s, amazing. So for me, it's about the why. I mean, I'm in my early 70s too, and it's about the wise women, whatever age you are, 17 or 70, that actually are passionate and knowledgeable and will stand together and say, enough is enough. We have to create change, and this is the way we do it. And I want to give you a quote, which is actually from a wonderful man called Buckminster Fuller, who was a visionary architect and designer from America from the 30s and 40s, early 50s. And I quote this all the time. And it's very interesting for me that a lot of people are making the same quote, not because they've heard me say it, but because it's right for now. And it says, you never change things by fighting existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So for me, that's what women have to do now. We have to, with the men, create a new model that makes the old model, the patriarchal greed and corruption that we're seeing on a daily basis, obsolete. And we're doing something that is about growing food for the children. Everybody that has got any sense is talking about building a future for the generations to come. And that's what our role is now as wise women. It's not about just this generation or even my generation. I mean, my generation is now really there to build the foundations for my grandchildren and my grandchildren's children, and the seven generations to come is what the Indigenous women always say. And that's what we have to do. And it will be the women doing that. And there is no time left, whether it's environmental, whether it's gender equality. Of course, we have to have gender equality. It's ridiculous that we don't have it in this day and age. But
I know about you, but I'm not going to be alive, right, when we actually get like pay equality. And I've just said, like, I can't wait that long, like, for the next generation, because I won't be alive then, like, unless they develop this miracle drug that might keep me going. In my like early 50s, it saddens me to think like we're still talking about pay equality and like, and we're not going to achieve that for years to come.
It's not. Is it about pay equality? Isn't it about us being in charge of our own finances, earning our own money with our own businesses? I mean, I'm looking now at all sorts of ways of creating a new economy, and I'm talking to a lot of women right now of going back to a new economy based on the ancient. So whether it's barter, exchange, community currency, the banks are going through collapse. We've got money being printed left, right, and centre by all the governments, and to get through this current situation, which has mostly been about corruption anyway. And how can we create a new financial economic model? I was on a conference at the weekend where they were talking about gross national product and GDP, and it's always been based on the profits of businesses. What about what we're doing to the environment? What about the people that are carers or in the home, the child carers, whether they're men or women? Where's that on GDP? So the whole thing of the capitalist system has got to change, and it is changing because it's collapsing. So when you talk to me about we have to have equal pay, no, we don't have to have equal pay. We have to have our own businesses, our own organizations. We have to have a different economy, a different way of working, and a different way of earning based on our true values and not exploitation by big corporations. I'm feeling very, very angry and political at the moment, as you would have gathered.
Good for you, though. That's what we need to hear, right? Good for you.
All the rubbish that goes on, our own government, just pathetic. They sacked another minister today because of corruption. They tried to save him and his lies, and they couldn't. I saw yesterday in the United States, the Republicans have come back into power, or coming that way, because the Democrats haven't offered anything that has really got to people. And on the British TV news last night, they interviewed a lot of mothers, white middle-class mothers in the area of Virginia. And they felt that they were going to be protected more by this guy had managed to convince them. It could be right. I don't know. But we have to protect our own children. We have to take power in our own hands, not think that these men are going to do it for us, because they're not. So that's my feeling about it all. Over to you.
So assuming we can move over from a good friend of mine, a mentor of mine, a man who's very passionate about, the role that women play. We were both on the executive team for a company, and he turned around and he looked at the leadership team and he goes, if you look around, he said, this team is made up of male, frail, stale, and pale, i.e. white, old, you said like men, and like they're, and we've got like the token fourth or whatever we want to call it, woman on, and we need to change that narrative. And as an example, he would refuse to be participate in a conference or a panel if there wasn't like equal representation, whether that be like women or like diverse groups or diverse ethnic groups. But we've been talking about this for a long time, right? So why is it like, what advice have you got to give to say, like, let's own that future? We like the statistics tell us it all, right? We know women make most of the commercial decisions. They're actually not only running homes and families or on their own. And in the developing markets, we know that the youngest population is going to come from the developing markets. Africa will have the youngest population of the world, and many of those are women that are doing great things, but their voices aren't being heard. You're saying it's time to do that, and you've managed to create that momentum. So what do we do around this ecosystem that we know, I think actually has been heightened through COVID, right? A pandemic that hit the whole world, that I think has brought societal issues to the surface to the extent like we can't ignore it anymore, right? We can pay lip service to it, but there is enough of a desire and movement. And you've been like doing that, building that ecosystem, building that network through what you've been doing. What advice can you give to women to say, like, let's build that ecosystem much, much stronger and much, much faster? Like what were some, like, if you could say like 3 things or 5 things that I think if we just did individually or collectively, they might be really small things, but the effect, the multiplier effect is huge. What could they be?
Okay, so you said a lot of different points there in one statement. First of all, why does it carry on the way it is with white, stale, pale men? Because they're the ones that invite in people that look like them, sound like them. That's what makes them comfortable. So if you are chairman of a board and you are retiring, the board and you will find somebody that is like yourself, because that's what they do, because that's what makes people feel comfortable. That's number one. Number two, how can we change that? Well, women have to stand up and be seen and be heard and stay on track. Very, very important. Not to lose their confidence. How do we get that confidence? By supporting each other. Women have got to not gossip, not go into competition, not feel that threatened by other women. They've got to know that we're all there for each other. And it's hard because women can be highly competitive. We're not perfect by any means. So we have to kind of let go of that. And we have to realize that the only way forward is to do it together. And I work with a program which I call the Power of Seven, which is based on 7 archetypes, which are in all of us, for women, really. And it's Seed Sower, which is the idea side of yourself. And Alchemist, which is the transformational aspect of yourself that takes your dreams to reality. Medicine Woman, which is about the well-being of yourself and of the people and your project, people that you work with and people in your community. Storyteller, which is what we're doing now, is telling our stories whichever way we can, sharing them. Sky Dancer, which is about relationships and partnerships, building up. Space Weaver, the inner artist, and Wisdom Keeper, who holds the space. And those 7 archetypes for me, which although ancient, totally relate to the modern world. So I am building up pods, as I call them, of, again, I've been talking about pods for years, and suddenly there's pod things come up, of groups of 7 women who can work together, taking those roles in that particular pod. And whatever women I meet, they always resonate more with one of those 7 than the others, even though we've got all of them in. So I talk about me, we, us. And you start with me, having alignment from those 7 aspects of ourself, our spiritual self, our well-being self, our ideas. We get into harmony, and then we then get into a group of 7, a pod, to make changes in our community, work together in a large corporation, supporting each other, which I've done in places like McDonald's, created that, as I say, there's doing a business in your own community or a community initiative. And then us is when all these small pods share their stories and experiences and wisdom with each other. And then we can create societal shift. So me, we, us is about start with yourself, because that's, if you're not in balance, you can't help anybody. And if you're not really focusing on your own well-being, then we is the group of 7, and then us is how we spread that out to create a societal shift that you're talking about, from community to community, from pod to pod. Now, it's a big dream, and I've had it for a long time, and I teach workshops on it all the time, and I do coaching on it. And, if anybody's listening to this and wants to know more, they can find out. They can look up Lynne Franks very easily and find me. So that's how I'm doing it. Also, I believe in a cooperative society. I've written about that many years ago, which is about cooperation between men and women, cooperation between the human race and the environment, cooperation between the young and the old, between science and spirituality, between governments and NGOs, non-governmental organizations, through business and civil society. So it's really, we do not have a cooperative society. Yeah. We have a society based on greed and power still, and corruption. So we, as women, have to stand up whatever way suits us. If we feel like going on a protest march, go on a protest march. If we feel like just talking about it in a cafe to a couple of our friends, just do it that way. But we need to wake up. We need to become conscious, and we need to raise our vibration, because our spiritual vibration, whatever our particular belief system is a very important part of all this. So it's about keeping that essence aside, that really alive. I'm a Buddhist. I chant twice a day. And that, for me, keeps me totally in harmonious balance with everything I'm doing. So I think it's an important thing that it doesn't all go in the head, but it comes from the heart. So I keep talking about how we have to live from love, not fear, because we live in a society which is fear-induced, whether you turn on the TV news like I do, or whether you open a newspaper, it's you're going to get COVID, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. It's all fear, 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 fear. Now we're all wearing masks and no one can even see each other. It's another good thing about Zoom. So we have to come out of that fear state and be in a love state. And that's it. Women, men, children, animals.
So I think the power of 7 is quite interesting, right? So I'm going to come back to it because I think, listeners, if you didn't take that in, those 7 elements, go back and listen to them. Because I think what you just described right now, actually, I put it in the commercial context. I put it in the societal. I'm a massive believer that organisations can have social impact and make money and be profitable, and that the two are good, right? And that the two, if you do them right, rather than just doing them lip service, you can create but those 7 that you just described, and I really do encourage, go back and listen to them, play each one and stop it, pause it and listen to it again. You described.
They can be found on my website as well. You can find them. Of course,
and we'll come back. We'll definitely show that at the give them the details for that at the end. But you've really articulated, I think, actually, it feels like what leaders need to have is the capabilities that they bring to the table today, don't they? Whether they're government leaders, whether they're leaders of big corporations, aren't they I'm kind of hearing about this is the new leadership competency that somebody needs to have, or this is the new leadership skill. I mean, you just described 7 attributes that actually needs to embody, whether you're a woman leader in the home, whether you're a male leader of one of these massive corporations that, by the way, if you are a leader and are listening, and you have a much bigger role to play today, and people are wanting you to play a bigger role, if you're listening, CEOs, around having a societal voice. Those 7 elements, to me, describe what an organisation should embody. Not just a leader, but an organisation, whether it's a community or... I mean, it's a pretty powerful concept.
Yeah.
That as you say,
and true leadership and the future is not about the traditional way we have now of the up and then it goes down in a linear sense. For me, true leadership is about circular, everybody in a leadership role, but doing their role as a leader. So it's really about helping the holding it from the bottom. True leadership is holding from the bottom and supporting other people on their way up, particularly young people. That's true leadership. And if you look at tribal elders indigenous,
they bring it together, right? It's an ecosystem.
They are, especially the women. They are not there to create some kind of powerful role for themselves. They are there to hold up the tribe. And that's an
enabler, right? It's the enabler system. Yeah. Lynne, I'm there's so much that we can cover, and I'm conscious that we're probably going to have to bring it to a close. But I'm almost in my head, I'm already going to the podcast that we should be doing on each one of those 7 elements and how, what a woman can do. And not just women, guys, you listen to, and young people, whatever age, across the world, if you just took each one in core, there's so much to be nurtured from that. My God, yeah, I have to hone it in. So I would say I'm conscious we, as much as I want to continue, we do need to kind of think about wrapping this up. And we haven't even touched on all the books that you've written. I want to know why the titles were the titles that you gave them. So there are 2 questions to end on. One is the titles of your books they're very powerful in the statement that they make. Did you think, so question 1, were you purposeful in thinking about the titles of the books what women want, right? And what they need?
I didn't write a book.
The conferences and the events, sorry, that you anything that you have done and how you have framed it has had a very powerful overarching message. It's it's bang in your face, and if you don't see it, I don't know how you miss it, right? Has that been conscious? Question 1. Last question to end on is what I ask everybody that's been on this podcast. This is all about daring to, right? Daring to is about daring to be different, daring to challenge, daring to rip up the rule books. And actually, as you put it, I think really eloquently, it's not about creating and trying to improve what we had. It's about creating something new, right? It's about creating that new vision. So what's your daring to moment, desire, or aspiration? So those are the last 2 questions.
What's my daring to? Okay, so the first question is, do I deliberately brand my books and my conferences on something that is going to have effect. Of course I do. So I'm a PR person by trade. So I think branding, and when I write a book, the title is the first thing I think of, and then I write the book around that. So that is, thank you for asking me, though. That is important. Absolutely Now, which I wrote in my first book, Grow, which is an acronym for Gorgeous, Real, Original Woman. That's a Modern Woman's Handbook. Anyway, Bloom. They're all. A lot of them are based around the metaphors of planting seeds and gardens. So I that's all my work's around that, really. And then what was the question?
You're daring to, whether it's for you personally or for somebody else. Like, what's your daring to moment of, like, either it could be something that you've done.
In the
could
future,
it be something that you've done? It could have been in the past or the future. Whatever, like, hits you, like, in the soul that goes.
There isn't one thing. I mean, I think of something and I do it, and then afterwards I think, oh my God, that was a bit stepping into the abyss. But I've been on an English reality show. That was something I never should have done, and that was stupid.
I bet you rocked it, and they were all like they gained so much from having you on that. I can just see it. Like, it would have been fun and challenging, and you would have, like, pushed them out of their comfort zone and said,
yeah. Well, your thing is, you're not in control on those things because it's all produced. But I don't think there's anything. I mean, I've still got lots more to do. Even at my age, I'm looking at how we can create a new feminine-led economy, which is really the biggest dream I've got right now, which will be digital, and how we can do that. So I'm working with some women on that. I just push myself ahead all the time and do crazy things, and afterwards think, what the hell was I doing? But I get these ideas. I want a women's radio station. I think there really needs to be one. I used to chair one.
You did? Cool vibe, right?
Yeah, nice. And I'd love to see one now, which is global digital women's radio station. There isn't one, and I think there's a real need, something that could work in Africa and all over the world, really. So those are ideas I still want to make happen. So nothing left. I've done a number of trainings where I've pushed myself to my limit, jumped off telegraph poles at 60 feet in the air with just a harness on. I've done all that. So I know that I'm pretty, I won't say I'm pretty fearless, I guess, and do crazy things all the time.
And what a great, end statement. Women, if you're listening, men, if you're listening, it's about being fearless, being crazy, and pushing the limits. So if people want to know more about you, Lynne, how can they get in touch? What's your website? What's, if you're on Twitter or LinkedIn, what is the best way to, connect and be part of this movement?
Well, my website is lynnefranks.com, which is LYNNE, lynnefranks.com, and you can get hold of me there. And it's details about Power of Seven are there. I am on Twitter. I am on LinkedIn. I am on Facebook. I am on Instagram. I am on Telegram. You name it, you can find me. I'm not hard to find. But the best place you can find me really is probably through my website at lynnefranks.com.
Awesome. And listeners, if you want to find out more about DARE and what we're doing and some of the work that we have been focusing on, which is all around daring to be different, daring to challenge, daring to create new. You can find us at www.dareworldwide.com. You can get in contact with us on LinkedIn. You can contact me at Rita_Trahan at Twitter. We've got some really exciting research that we've just done and that we're sharing. And it reminds me of a book that I read to end this podcast on, which was about dead aid, about all of the aid that's given through organisations, international organisations around the world. It's written by a young woman about, actually, it isn't about just giving economic developing markets money. It's about helping them to grow businesses, helping create the economy. It's called Dead Aid, and there's a quote in there. It's unknown, and it said, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The best time was to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Maybe now is the time to plant the new trees. It's something like that. But basically it was saying, we may have thought of this a long time ago and never really nurtured it, but let's get on and do it right. Let's get where we know we want to go and build a society that we want generations to be part of in the future. Lynne, I am inspired, in awe, what can I say? Thank you so much for being a guest.
Thank you very much for having me here. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Enjoyed the conversation? Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes of Daring 2. Also, check out our website, dareworldwide.com, for some great resources around business in general, leadership, and how to bring about change. See you next time.